No,
Nope,
you got me.
don't look at each other.
Hello, friends, readers, and book lovers. Welcome back to our series on book clubs. We're at part 4.
Part 4.
And we're going to talk about fiction book recs for your book club. But if you missed parts 1 through 3, I'd really encourage you to go back and watch those. We went through how to start a book club, what to do once you're in a book club, and nonfiction recs. But now we're to fiction recs.
Yes, we are.
And I'm Elizabeth, and I'm the marketing manager here.
And I'm Amy. I'm one of the buyers, and I'm going to kick us off
Yes.
with my all-time go-to favorite recommendation for book clubs for historical fiction. This is one of my top favorite books of all time. This is The Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek by Kim Michelle Richardson. This is a historical fiction story that combines 2 actual historical elements. So it combines the pack horse librarians of Kentucky during the Great Depression times and the blue people of Kentucky who had a rare skin or a rare blood disorder that turned their skin blue. So our main character, Cussie, is one of the last blue people of Kentucky. So she's discriminated against as a colored person, even though she's Caucasian, but she's different. And she decides to join the pack horse librarians because she's so passionate about books and reading, and bringing books of all sorts, including like little scrapbooks that they made with like recipes and things, like into the hill country to the kids and the families and the people who live there. There is so much packed into this. This was the best book club discussion I think that I've ever had, or one of the best, because there's just so many themes of identity, of prejudice, of faith, of family, of community. Like there's so much in here that I think anybody could have a really good conversation about this book. There is also a sequel called The Bookwoman's Daughter, which sort of jumps in 30 years later with her daughter.
Okay.
And some of the same themes come up, but in a different time period.
Yeah.
And she's writing a 3rd book, which is coming out in the spring, and I'm so excited. So Bookwoman of Troublesome Creek for all of your book club needs.
I love a historical fiction about like an uncommon part of history.
Yes.
Or not a well-known part of history.
Yep.
Cool. All right, I'm bringing Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow by Gabrielle Zevin. And this is a book that is about love and friendship and connection and humans with the backdrop of video games.
Yep.
Really, like, you might want to emphasize the video game part, but like that's not what this book is about. But it is about these 3 friends who get really close in college and decide to start a video game company together, and it follows them for 30 years of their life and their friendship and their all the ups and downs of their interpersonal relationships along with this video game company. And so I think this was it's gonna bring up conversations of friendship and relationship for sure. It's also gonna like be interesting if you don't know much about video game world. Like I think you'll find interesting tidbits there that'll be fun to discuss. I think it would be fun if your book club then went and played a video game together. I think that would be cool. Like the video games in here are fictional, so you can't play these ones, but like what a fun
go find some Pac-Man activity. Or something.
Yeah. And so I think just like rich with discussion pieces. Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow.
All right, I have another historical. This one is called This Rebel Heart by Catherine Locke. This is actually a young adult novel, but I actually listened to the audiobook with my father on a road trip, and we both loved it.
Okay.
So this is another sort of unfamiliar time period in history. It centers around the 1956 revolt that was mostly student-led in Budapest, Hungary. So it's after World War II, but you still have a lot of the same forces at play there. And you follow a young woman who sort of becomes part of the resistance. The whole book takes place in about a month.
Oh, wow.
So it goes pretty smooth or pretty quickly. There are some very slight magical elements.
Okay.
But they don't overshadow the historical part. They really lend just a little bit of an artistic sort of metaphor to the whole story. One of the elements is that for a long time, everything is in black and white. And as the rebellion breaks through, you start to get colors. But it's so subtle that it doesn't feel like a fantasy novel. It still feels accurate. And my father, who is a historian, was like, no, that is pretty accurate to like the time, to the events in time. You just are focusing on fictional characters. So just a really interesting look at a slightly different aspect of history with similar themes to World War II fiction, but not World War II fiction.
Yeah.
So
cool.
This Rebel Heart.
All right. This next one is When Women's Were Dragons by Kelly Barnhill. This I think is a fan favorite of anyone who's read it. This is technically historical fiction, but it is alternate history. These things did not really happen, but it is set in the 1950s in an alternate history world where women start becoming dragons. Like actually turning into dragons. It's called The Mass Dragoning, and it's this book like follows the start of the mass dragoning and then what happens afterwards and how that changes like politics and cultural dynamics and all these different things, and like why are these women turning into dragons? Is everybody going to turn into a dragon? Is there some metaphors for female rage?
Maybe.
You could maybe make that assumption. But it's excellently done. It doesn't feel forced or too like you feel so immersed in it that you're like, this isn't weird, and then you're like, it's kind of weird, but like in a really good way. Very immersive, very interesting, lots of discussion pieces for your book club for sure.
Yes, absolutely. Another one of my just all-time favorite. All right, so another one, if you have a book club that wants fiction but maybe has a harder time getting into a full story, or maybe you want to like dabble with romance but not completely dive in. This is called Love in Color by Bolu Babalola. This is a collection of mythical tales from around the world. Some of them are familiar stories just retold with like an African or other world spin. So like there's the story of Psyche, there's the story of Nefertiti, and then there are a couple of original tales. But it gives you just a different perspective of maybe some familiar stories with different cultural elements in them. It's not spicy, it's not super steamy, but it gives you a different perspective in shorter stories. So that would be a fun one, sort of retold fairy tales with a world spin on it.
Nice. All right, I also brought romance, and I'm counting this as one pick because, and I have a reason for it, but this is a series by Kennedy Ryan. It's the Skyland series, and there are 3 books in it, and you can read them in any order. Like there is a little bit of like follow through plot, but you can read them in any order. You're not going to miss anything if you just pick one of them. But so our first one is Before I Let Go, then This Could Be Us, and then Can't Get Enough. And Kennedy Ryan is excellent at writing Black love stories that involve complicated issues in a very well thought out way. They're deeply emotional, deeply like cathartic, I would say. They are pretty spicy, so like be aware of that. But in a very intentional, like it's part of the plot in a really good way. That's how I would describe it. But Before I Let Go it deals with a couple that has fallen out of love, and they're trying to figure out if they can fall back into love. And they have a history of grief together, shared grief. There is a miscarriage that is mentioned in this, and another person in their life who has passed away that happened before this book starts, but it deals with like the aftermath of that, and it's referenced in this book. This Could Be Us is a woman whose husband gets in a really tricky legal situation, and they end up getting divorced, and she has to figure out like, what does my life look like? I've been at this stay-at-home mom. My life wasn't exactly what I thought it was because my husband did this thing, and what do I do with that? And so that was really good. And then there's a prominent character in here who is autistic that is handled really well, that talks about the autism community and how that impacts families. And then Can't Get Enough is 2 very successful and wealthy people who find love together. And there is conversations of dementia. There's a parent with dementia, and conversations of child by choice and childless by choice, I meant, and things like that. So again, like heavy topics in a really well done way. And I think my recommendation is kind of pick for your book club what of these versions of these conversations would your book club like most connect to or want to discuss. And pick one of these books based on that. So.
All right, well, since you got to do 3 in 1, I'm going to do 2 in 1 for my next one. So one thing that I have found really fun to do with book clubs is to reread classics that I had previously read. So like Jane Austen stories that I read when I was in high school and maybe early 20s, and now I'm reading them again. And just the very different perspective that I have on them. So the one I brought, for example, is Persuasion by Jane Austen. When I read that one in high school, I just didn't connect to the characters, which makes sense. It's a second chance romance. But now it is quickly moving to the top of my Jane Austen preference list because I am getting so much more of the nuance. I think I can appreciate more of the language and just like the challenges that the characters are going through because I have been through more in my life than I had as a high schooler. So I think, and I've read with one of my book clubs, we've read quite a few classics. Like we made that an intention to read a classic fairly regularly. And we didn't require that it be one that you hadn't read before because it's hard to find those. But that's been really, really beneficial to just go back through and we read some that it's like, you know what, maybe that doesn't need to be a classic anymore. Like that definitely had a place. Doesn't hold up or just didn't, whereas other ones you get just a whole nother perspective on it. And then similarly, I also recommend finding like modern day or newer retellings or reworkings of classics. So one of my favorite series is by Tirzah Price, who is one of our favorite local Michigan authors. She rewrites Jane Austen stories as murder mysteries. So this is Pride and Premeditation. Lizzie and Darcy are both like lawyers who are trying to solve a murder that's being pinned on Bingley. Like just really, really fun. And especially if you are familiar with the source material to see it. But there are so many Jane Austen retellings. Like James just came out, which is Huckleberry Finn retelling. Like ones that you think you know the story and go and give it a try, either with a modern day retelling or just an updated reworking of the story. That can be fun for discussion.
For sure. All right, this is You Are Here by Karen Lynn Greenberg. And I didn't know what I was getting into with this book, but it is a like character study of this group of individuals who all interact at this mall. So like the cohesive piece is the location of this mall. Some people work there, some people just go there, and you kind of see how they all interact with that and interact with each other. But it is a beautiful, again, character study of these individuals. It gets a little heartbreaking in the middle, but it ends on a very hopeful note. And I think all of those things, again, just make for really good discussion fodder. And a mall is such a fun location that we are all really familiar with, and we probably all have a different kind of relationship with the mall, that I think it's a really interesting setting for this kind of story.
All right. I also think that book clubs should read more children's literature, intermediate literature, young adult literature. This is the book, The Ogress and the Orphans by Kelly Barnhill. This is the book that I think that every human being should read. It is a beautiful, at its core, it's a story of like community and relationships. There is a family that has these adopted children that are named alphabetically, which is one of my like chef's kiss things. And they live in a community that is being sort of pushed apart from each other by a very smarmy politician in the area who is basically taking away stories, is taking away books, is taking away opportunities for connecting so that he can be more in power. So there's an interesting parable there just about leadership and power. And one of the things that he does is there is an ogress who lives out of town. And all she wants to do, she has this garden farm. She likes to cook and she wants to share food with the people. But they have created this community of distrust and fear of anything other that they start to alienate her. And so it's a beautiful parable about like the power of stories to connect people, the power of working in community with one another. It's beautifully written. Kelly Barnhill is just chef's kiss masterpiece in write. I will read anything that she writes. But again, I think that every human being should read this book. So.
And yes, this is the same Kelly Barnhill as...
Yes, same author as When Women Were Dragons. She writes all over the board. but it's beautiful.
Oh, we love her so much that we had to bring two.
Yep.
I also have a middle grade. This is The Swifts, a dictionary of scoundrels by Beth Lincoln. And again, a middle grade adventure story is what I would call it, following a family who they also have an interesting naming technique. When a new child is born into this family, they open up a family dictionary and they pick a name out of the dictionary. And then there's kind of a ongoing discussion about if you embody the name that you have been given because you were given that name, or was it kind of like serendipitous that you received this name because then you were that person.
Yeah.
And so like that's interesting to think about and talk about. And this main character we have, her name is Shenanigan, and she gets in a lot of shenanigans, and she goes on this like mystery adventure during the family reunion, and spends the book trying to figure out this mystery. And it's so fun. These characters are so vivid and imaginative, and it's very creative and interesting without being full. It's not fantasy, but it's just, yeah, so fun.
Very fun.
Yeah.
Yep. And there is a sequel to that one.
And there is a sequel to that one.
That is just as fun. Okay. My last one is These Summer Storms by Sarah MacLean. Sarah MacLean is one of my all-time favorite authors for her historical romances. This is her first dip into contemporary fiction. It's technically not classified as a romance, although Sarah MacLean cannot write a book that does not have a romantic plot in it. So there is a romantic subplot.
Yes.
But this is about a very dysfunctional, wealthy family, the Storms, who the father dies right as the book is starting, and the family has to all come together for the reading of the will, which has all sorts of stipulations. Think like the inheritance games.
Yeah.
Like he puts very specific stipulations on how they're all going to be able to inherit this, kingdom that he has created. And it all takes place on this little island out in the middle of the ocean. So you also get actual storms coming through. The character dynamics, the sibling dynamics are fantastic. Sarah MacLean knows how to write interesting interpersonal dynamics that, even though all of the characters seem a little bit wacky, they also feel believable.
Yeah.
And the one really cool thing that happens is you get most of the story from the one main character's point of view, but you do get sort of a chapter from each of the other siblings, so that as you're going through, you're like, gosh, I can't even relate to that person at all. And then you get a little bit of their perspective and you're like, oh,
kind of changes everything.
Okay, I can kind of see why you are the way that you are. They're still not all likable, but you can sort of relate and understand. And there is a very nice romantic subplot with a stranger on a train. So highly recommend Sarah MacLean.
All right, my last one is Tartufo. By
that also
Kira
sounds
Jane
like an
Wilson.
island out in the middle of...
Yeah, except it's not. It is, Tartufo is an Italian word for truffle. And it is about a small town and the people that live in this small town. And this small town is hard up for cash, just as a whole town. And so they have a truffle hunter amongst their townspeople who finds the world's largest truffle that they know of. And it becomes this comedy of errors, series of events where they're trying to put on an auction for this truffle, and truffles deteriorate the longer they're out of the soil. And so there is like speed that it needs to happen at this. And they think that this is going to be their savior of the town. But it brings up all these emotions and all of these, like, you find out like secrets of everyone's past, and kind of like old beefs that come up that they either have to resolve or figure out in some way. And it's quirky and goofy and very heartfelt and has some beautiful passages in it. I would maybe recommend trying this on audiobook, as there are a lot of Italian words. And so either you might, if you know Italian, great, but you might be skimming across some of those, or if you listen to it on audiobook, then they pronounce them for you, which is helpful. But I loved this book. I want to recommend it to everyone. And again, just like the different characters means that there's somebody to relate to for everyone in your group. So,
oh, fun.
Yeah, thank you for joining us for this edition of Book Club Recommendations for Fiction. And we hope you check out the other parts as well. Happy reading.